Welcome to Season 4 of Might in Motion, the podcast that champions motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. I'm Marianna, Kinnee, your host, bringing you conversations with inspiring leaders and innovators who challenge the status quo and push boundaries in their careers and lives. Whether you're here to grow, lead, or ignite your own journey, we're here to keep you moving forward. Let's dive in. Today, I welcome Tyler Nielsen. He is the founder of Vast Insight Partners, a boutique consultancy that helps businesses translate financial insights into operational actions. With 20 years of experience in financial planning and analysis, data analytics, forecasting, and sales and operations planning, Tyler has supported organizations of all shapes and sizes, from global enterprises to startups, to grow profitably. I am really excited about this conversation. My background with operations, supply chain, and stores, I love how you weave in the financial piece and margin. So I can't wait to dive in, Tyler.
Yeah, likewise. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for joining us. And, we were talking, a few weeks ago, and then again in the green room about there's this intersection of strategy and operations and how that can really impact margin and what that does for a business. So let's just dive in. What does that mean for people who may not know?
Yeah, it's really giving visibility and unlocking the data that you have on hand. How can you leverage the tools and data sets that you already have, provide insights that are either there, just need to be unlocked from a margin or a profile perspective from SKUs, or a customer analytic to understand where customers are or are not profitable. And then making sure that those data and fact-based conversations are occurring to drive the right decisions for your business to go and execute. I've seen far too many times where businesses have the financials, they have a supply chain leader, they have an operations leader, and not all of them talk continuously or in the same manner, right? Disparate discussions, disparate definitions. And it usually draws after action reviews that don't turn out great, or everybody's running a different direction. So I drive organizations to provide margin insights, financial insights, whether that's budgeting, planning, forecasting, or variance analysis, and pulling that into the S&OP process and doing what I call optimized integrated planning. So how do you bring scenarios or modeling from the finance world into a S&OP process that needs to be dynamic? The stagnant world of traditional cycled S&OP processes that just have month over month recurring discussions are a little bit to the wayside now. You have to be a little more ahead of the program, ahead of the script, and ready, willing, and able to react with decisions based on the facts that you do have. So that's what I do for organizations in the manufacturing space.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that. Sometimes there's all these third parties and they don't necessarily speak the same language. And in my 25 years in the supply chain space, I saw that on a repeat. One of the things that helped me was getting experiences in different areas of the business, either from a store operations or an inventory planning, or merchandising, supply chain and transportation. As you look back on your background, how much importance did that play, or does that play in your ability to now help people and companies make good strategic decisions that have a positive impact to margin?
Yeah, I think it's the foundation. I went into finance because of, I'll say, the lack of awareness I had when I was a younger child, and I wanted to educate myself in that white space, and that was kind of the path I took in most of my career. So I actually started in a procurement role and understanding the buying patterns on direct and indirect materials, understanding how hedging played on the direct side, and then went into manufacturing finance, supporting a manufacturing facility, high velocity manufacturing. And then after 5 or 6 years, moved into a corporate planning role where I was the one supporting all the engineers doing the multi-million dollar projects for new facilities. Each one of those steps um, gave me the foundation of saying there's much more in finance than just your traditional budget, your traditional
Mhm.
analytic. The variance analysis is different, but the why and the questions you need to ask and the depth you need to go to assemble everything to the narrative to the data, not just a random narrative, not just made up narrative, but the narrative as to why things are happening and how you can afflict change. That was foundational for me. Understanding all of these different pieces from capital finance to sales finance to manufacturing finance, and eventually working into a path of connecting your revenue planning to your supply planning, making
Mm.
sure your revenue planning was a different discussion than your demand planning, and making sure the teams were understanding the definitions. And it was foundational for me. Um, I think about a framework where there's a bucket of Legos, sitting out on the floor, and it's just everything's a hot mess, right? There's things everywhere, and that's raw data, right?
Mhm.
And eventually, you maybe sort it by color, and then you stack them by height, and then you arrange them by which one's tallest or shortest or widest at the base. And then the next thing you know, you say, "Okay, I want to build a house." Now I've got all the foundations of the blocks, and I build this house. That to me was my steps in my career of understanding each of the layers I needed to add, but then also taking the raw data and turning it into stories so that the raw data is, the disparate pieces all over the floor. I don't know if that's a house, if it's a rocket ship, if it's a car, right? But when
Mhm.
you sort, analyze, review, and then start putting it together with the details that you have, that provides you a foundation to build a house and the framework, whether that's organizing data or understanding all the questions that you need to ask with the experience that we've gained. Um, yeah, for me, it's been a lot of, I always knew I wanted to run a business so that I could help more organizations than just the one I was in. I just didn't know when that time was going to come. And therefore, I was continually exploring my white spots and understanding from large public to small startup to private equity to non-traditional manufacturing businesses. There's always an opportunity to connect and learn and fill that white spot so I could be more educated to help in the future.
Yeah, Tyler, that really resonates. I know, like for me personally, as I reflect on my journey, taking those different steps, getting uncomfortable, putting myself somewhere that maybe I didn't know everything, really helped me to see a bigger picture. And I've encouraged people in their careers to do the same thing. So it's really refreshing to talk to somebody else, especially on the finance side, which finance always scared me, right? We always use this joke about merchant math, right? Like this math isn't
Yeah,
real math, it's merchant math. But you're weaving it into stories to allow operational changes to drive financial excellence, right? You want your company to be excellent in that arena. I love that.
yeah, and providing the platform to have difficult, robust, complex conversations. Um, I think whenever you talk about having financial data or data-driven decision making, everybody thinks it's positive and aspirational conversations, and they might actually be difficult things, right? Hey, we're spending too much on X, and it shows here, here, and here because you're losing margin. Nobody wants to come with the bad news,
Yeah.
um, but it's at least news, or I shouldn't even use news. I don't want to be a news reporter because that's after the action. I want to be forward-looking and predictive in the modeling that we do. And that's the analytic that you can provide to how do you tie that through to say, hey, 2 months from now, I need this type of inventory because this customer forecast is increasing and
Hmm.
it's a good margin. But if you don't have that connectivity and that consistent thread of continuity in the process, everybody's reacting by the seat of their pants, and it becomes difficult to execute a business and align your strategy to your goals. So,
Yeah. So it's that stopping the reaction to be proactive. I love that. I love that. You know,
yeah, I heard one point in my career very early on, and if the person listens to this, they'll know who it is. But um, You never want to be a news reporter. You never just want to be talking about everything that happened because you're
Yes.
already too late. And
Yes.
that's stuck with me. That was year one of right out of college, and that stuck with me to try to lean into businesses, ask the right questions, and be a business partner in how to execute.
I think that's so critical because many times, oh, we're going to do our weekly review on how we did. You're actually talking probably 2 weeks in the rears, not even last week. So the news is beyond stale, right? And
Yeah.
it's making that pivot to start thinking towards the future of, if I make this change or if we shift direction, what's the potential that it could do, and then track towards that potential to see what you do have was the cause and the effect what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and putting the right processes and KPIs in place so that you're having KPIs that are challenging each other. It's
Yeah.
not just a report of, hey, we did X amount of sales, right? Because revenue is an afterthought. Revenue is the outcome of the actions you need to execute, and making sure you're looking at the right things from an inventory balance, from the SKU mix, from the WIP in process, right? Um, and making sure your capacities are aligned. Because if a spike happens, can I or can't I flip the change I need in the production capability? Um, right? Not overburdening your overhead um, because you have to make a whole bunch of product, and now next thing you know, you're putting a whole bunch of overtime on the line, and just it's not cost effective. So looking forward and having KPIs that are challenging each other, not just reporting out the news, is um, it's difficult. It takes time, right?
Yeah.
It's not this light switch moment where you walk in the room, you're like, ah, there's all the light, right? It's not a aha moment. It takes time. You have to educate the business as to why you're doing it and how you're doing it. And that's, again, a lot of what I help to do and unlock for organizations, so that you allow the look forward so you can make the right decisions, and at some points make the wrong ones and learn quickly to correct it because you're looking forward.
Yeah. Your comment about KPIs challenging each other just gave me a shiver because when I was over inventory planning and replenishment for certain categories, you've got your in stock, right? And you're like, oh, we'll just load up the stores because then my in
Yeah,
stock will be where I need to be. And well, but wait, you gotta manage turns. Because if you're not selling it and turning it, then you're not moving the financials in the right direction. And I would pull my hair out because you could never be right. Nobody was ever going to go and pat the inventory person on behind the back and said, you bought exactly the right amount of inventory. It's always a little bit too little. It's always too much. It's never dead on.
yep, yep. You can, in forecasting, you just have to be right. You have to be okay with being wrong,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you have to move on, right? But I was challenged that with that early in my career. I'm like, oh, I got to get this spend forecast right, so that the team looks at me and says, hey, you forecasted to the dollar. And it's like, guys, dollars a rounding error. We're talking thousands, 25, 30, 40,000. If it doesn't roll to 150 and it's 100 versus 200,
Yeah.
like, now you can go dig into it deeper and drive the change, but you got to understand your materiality at the same level, to your point of what gets managed gets measured, and what can get measured can be manipulated if you don't have the right
Mm,
KPIs to challenge each other.
100%. Um, how do you kind of, if you're starting off with a client, how do you to kind of start that process of, even, is the data right? Because you mentioned like starting off with data, and that could still be garbage in, garbage
Yep.
out. What approach do you take to kind of solve those real world problems and avoid some of the headaches that people can have?
Yeah. So um, a couple different avenues. A lot of the insight you can pick up in a scoping conversation, right? Hey, client,
Mhm.
nice to meet you. Asking questions and understanding the scope, and make sure you're writing the scope properly. Some assessment may be twice as long for one client than it is for another, because that raw data might be a challenge to get up and running. But actually, a lot of it becomes in my short time with my firm. Um, the scoping is one thing, but then the initial data request to make sure you're properly scoping, right? I like to get over the first hurdle of, okay, we have a verbal agreement here, we have the NDA signed, we have everything aligned. The ink may not be fully complete on the financial and time commitment, but if we can get to an agreement on the NDA, I'm going to submit a request for data. And
Mhm.
that is going to be the next level of understanding of, one, it's going to be a little bit of an overwhelming request because I need a good chunk of data to get started. And two, it is a little bit of a test for you to how organized does it come back to me?
Mm,
At what depth does it look like, right? And are there any charts or analytics already placed into some of these data sets, or is it literally just an ERP dump that you just gave to me?
mhm,
And that to me is kind of like, okay, were there a couple yellow red flags in the scoping? Is this validating or denying that challenge of question, or what comes out of it with the data scoping conversation? So a lot of the times people are still asking and questioning the same things, and therefore the scoping can go one of two directions. It's the data's in a real bad spot, and we really need to focus on the upfront data part,
mhm.
which I'll have somebody on my team or some support people that I've worked with in the past help come in and help me clean that up, which is a whole different challenge than the FP&A and S&OP process. But if it's in a good spot and we see some continuity with data and we're in an okay spot, then scoping becomes pretty straightforward because the business is already very aware of what is needed. Um, but unfortunately, it's a case by case scenario. Um, I like to lean towards the 25 million plus businesses
Mhm.
because a lot of that is already a lot of those hurdles have already been overcome. Um, Now I'm probably leaving a lot of potential clients on the table between 10 and 25 million, and there may be one or two that makes sense for me to support there. However, it's not going to be focused on instituting a full scope FP&A planning process or an S&OP. It's probably more on coaching and educating and tax advisory conversations where I'll bring partners in to help them do tax planning tied to their financial discussions and strategy. So again, it's really dependent on the scope and the need, but that there's a couple opportunities to try to address the data if it's in a really bad spot. Um, and I've actually had one scenario where I've had to say, hey, can we get a little more support on this, or I need this person for a little more time because I need to get the data correct.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, usually clients are, oh, thanks for giving me that visibility. I didn't know we need to be there for you to come in and if they're ready, willing, and able, we'll coach them. We'll educate them on what needs to be done and what good looks like and how do we get there. That's I've been blessed to see a lot of good things. I've also been blessed to see a lot of bad things in business, and leaning on those bad things or those difficulties allows me to really help scale and scope on the front end of that to get a lot of that initial headache out of the way.
So we tend to talk a lot about supply chain on this podcast, and many times people think supply chain is just trucks, right? That's all it is, right? You're just moving boxes, right? But that that aspect of moving and shipping can really have a huge impact. When I think of margin, I think of merchants just because I come from the retail space, right? And that
Yeah.
that can vary, in different industries, but there's there's this connection between the two, and in your career you've been able to experience multiple things. How do you help explain either to a merchant or a manufacturer, like how that supply chain piece can actually have an impact to their margin?
Yeah. Um, it's really about boiling it back to simplified concepts and simplified
Mhm.
terms so that we're not. I don't want to talk finance and accounting speak all day. Um, yes, I will be the first finance person to say I also can get sick of it. Um, but it's really about, for me, the question always comes back to what is the client looking for when they say I need better margin visibility, and that could be they have 75 SKUs and really they only need the top five um, to maintain 90% of their margin. But nobody's ever analyzed that. I'd hope they have,
Mhm,
but maybe nobody's
mhm,
ever analyzed that. Or it's a customer, an ABC analytic on a customer or an inventory level and making
mhm,
sure you're looking at that properly. And I always like to say, most of the times with data, if you can cut it a different way, or if I can cut it a different way than what you've already done, that's a little bit of a flag for me
mhm,
because a lot of the people in larger businesses have looked at it, up, down, and sideways. And it really then becomes this is where that connectivity from finance to supply chain becomes so critical to say, okay, what if you might only sell 6 in a month, but do you need 10 in inventory or do you need 2 in inventory at this time?
Yeah.
Well, salesperson tells me I need 10 because they need to make sure they have the inventory. Well, does it take you a day to manufacture it or a month to manufacture it? Or does it take you 5 months to get more inventory in stock? Like, what's your tack time? What's your lead time? How does that look and how does that play in? Because in some instances, you might sell 6 in a month, you only need 2 in inventory at any time because your replenishment time is minimal. Or in some instances, it may be reversed. So again, understanding that connectivity, looking at a P&L, breaking down your BOM, and understanding how much you need, when you need it, what's your turns, and in some instances, saying why too many turns might be difficult for you, and maybe a bad situation for you to have more turns than you desire.
Hmm.
So again, it for me, the question always comes back to, even in educating what margins and how you connect it to the supply chain, what is the team looking at now? How are they looking at it? And then why did they start looking at it that way? What was their intent to get to that level? Because you're going to very quickly uncover why they're doing it the way they're doing it, and hoping that you can give them some type of awareness, or maybe another analytic to look at. Um, but at the end of the day, that connectivity of, let's get down to the floor, right? In a manufacturing facility, if I put somebody on a line, and they just sit there, whether there's units going through it or not, that's a fixed cost.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we're loading it properly, not overburdening the balance sheet with inventory production, and doing it in an effective manner with the forward looking, right? I keep talking about the forward looking conversation. What's our days of forward coverage, not our days of supply needed in the past? And just again, changing some of the definitions and the visibility to how maybe a schedule is made or a supply plan is executed, or what inventory holding level is being targeted, um, can really minimize the inventory, minimize the ultimate need of working capital, and ultimately improve margins, because either your cash conversion cycle is quicker or your cash in inventory is less. Um, and therefore, by default, you can be better costed, which in turn will improve your margins over time. So that's where that connectivity becomes so helpful. And I'm not a cost accountant. Like, I'll be the last person to tell you I'm a cost accountant. So I even have to challenge myself to make sure I'm looking at them the right way sometimes. Um, but that's why there are cost accountant experts to lean on in the world as well. So
Yeah. I mean, the way you're talking about things, I recall a time when I was dealing with, merchandising within a store, and I would bring my inventory person with me to just go look at it on a shelf and say, "Hey, you want me to have 50 and there's only physical room for 10, or this clip strip can hold, you know, 20, but you're only sending me 3." So it always looks anemic, right? So sometimes it's packaging changes, sometimes it's your assortment on a shelf, or what your manufacturing assortment, as you mentioned. All of this, I think, kind of plays together of visibility, looking at things maybe from a slightly different perspective, to bringing your teammates along with you is so critical.
yeah, I mean, in my business, I can do everything remote,
Hmm.
but I so enjoy being on the floor, being next to people, and understanding how they're viewing it. That to me is dramatically important to get to clients, see the inventory, touch the inventory, understand their workflow. Because to your point, it may not make sense theoretically, but when you see it, you're like, oh, I get what you're saying now, right?
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, I I purposefully don't talk about technology and tools, and um, I'm going to drop it because everybody's talking about AI, right? I don't talk about those things,
Yeah.
because for me the basis is people and process.
Hmm.
And if I can give visibility to the process and clean that up, the people then become the execution of that arm of process. And it is absolutely critical to have the people awareness too, because even though AI is getting really good, it's still not a human level. And being on the floor and being for how much COVID and the past has damaged us with with having the work from home. Um, that face-to-face connectivity, that engagement, that understanding it from the same perspective, that is never going to change in any business. And bringing people along with you is going to get you a lot farther.
Yeah, I love that. If you could look back, or as you look back on your career, what's kind of been, one of the things that you have been so grateful for that you would hope others would have that same grateful moment as they think about their careers?
Yeah, for me, it's been two things. One is just the opportunity to fill my white spots,
Mhm.
find the. I know it's so cliche, and I'm chuckling internally as I say this. I don't know what I don't know now. When I
Yeah.
was a 22-year-old, I thought I knew the world, right? And I was lucky enough to have people around me that saw what I knew, but also were aware of what I didn't know and allowed me to fill the white spots and drive towards the gaps. That didn't come until my early 30s, where I was like, wow, all these people were supporting me and helping push me to say, hey, you really need to understand sales finance too, Tyler. Go take find a sales finance job. Find a find a small business FP&A. Go figure that out, right? Go do that. Um, and I'm not usually one to follow other people's advice because I think I want to drive my own career. But at the same point, I had these people helping me identify what I could grow on and what I could advance my career even further with. Um, and I was also super lucky to have an environment where colleagues and what I will now call as mentors early on in my career were always ready, willing, and able to answer a question, be supportive, go grab coffee and lunch when I was hitting a difficult time. And it spun into this informal board of directors, so to say, right? It's a personal board of
Mhm.
directors of, if I have a problem or a concern or I've hit a roadblock, I've got people that will support me in the most nuanced conversations. And now even starting my firm, it's even become more unique because now I have other business owners and other groups that we're not there to sell, right? We're not going to sell each other. We're not each other's referrals. We're literally there to not allow people to fail,
Mm.
maintain accountability, and allow to ask the random questions that you don't have anybody else to ask, and you don't really want to pay for it, right? Because there are so many groups out there that are, yep, you can come join us, and we have this networking, and you look for referrals, and it's $200 a month. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, but where do I go talk about? I've got this contract, and I'm trying to figure out how do I word this, and my verbiage here doesn't make sense, and can I just have somebody read it? And you just build these engagements now, in this instance, over my career with this personal board of directors, but also with this group that has grown tremendously in the Milwaukee area. Um, of just other small business owners that are ready, willing, and able to help, but also
Mhm.
know you, also care, and are such a diverse group that you can lean on them. And I wish that upon everybody. It took me a lot longer than I desired to find that, and I wish that opportunity upon everyone to understand that asking for help is an okay thing, no matter what it is, whether it's life, work, or relationships. And that's I've been blessed with that, but it took me a long time to be able to reflect and say that.
That is awesome, and I think just a really powerful point to kind of culminate this conversation. You know, personally, asking for help can be hard, right? A lot of us are overachievers. We're type A. We want to do it ourselves. We did great in school. Why can't I get an A in what I'm doing here? But having those folks is key. I even have people that even to this day, I'm like, can you just read this email? Like, am I coming across in a really bad way? What am I missing? And 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 I have people who do the same with me, right? Where you can have
Yeah.
that radical candor and have it be okay, which is awesome. I write a lot of notes. We talked about this even before we started recording, and I just want to recap some of the things that I jotted down that it was I thought was really relevant. You talked about how you approach business challenges, and there's a scoping process, a definition of what really your customer or client's looking for, which then requires that there has to be data involved, and that data process might be overwhelming, but through education and coaching of your client, you really can make a lot of progress on helping them define a process, because a process is key to be able to see how everything works together and actually start driving operational changes that drive financial improvements. You talked about how that allows you to have data-driven conversations. It allows organizations to stop being reactive but proactive, and that whole don't be a news reporter, because if you're a news reporter, you're too late to the game. KPIs, those key performance indicators, on how you can create them to help challenge. The KPIs would challenge each other, and that allows you to actually start looking more forward instead of backwards, right? There's what you do to bring to the table to help boil these concepts that might be complicated for maybe a merchant to explain to a supply chain person, to explain to the manufacturing lead. It's trying to understand, what are they looking at today, and how are they looking at it? And then why are they looking at it that way? And then distilling that down by asking those what if questions to help people think about their financials and what they're doing in a different way. We talked about your background and how your foundation, by starting in procurement and working into purchasing and finance and all these different things, each step showed you that there's more than just numbers. It's a story. You're helping people now be able to take that Lego mess of raw data, sort it by common features, color, height, etc., to allow the organization to actually build a really strong foundation and building. And that comes back to that data, unlocking the data, providing insights, and helping parties talk to each other. And then finally, as you reflected back on your career, it was filling those white spaces, filling up those spots that maybe you just didn't know. And now, as you've moved through your career, you've created this board of directors that help you find accountability, and they're sounding boards, and they help you grow in not only your career, but in your personal life. And I think that new leaders, no matter where you are, what industry you're in, data is important. Having your own personal board of directors is important. It allows you to not only come up with better solutions, more innovative solutions, but also be able to hopefully get around what maybe some blind spots or those white spaces faster.
Yeah, and having somebody tell you how it is. I don't want it sugar coated. I don't want the cherry on top. Tell me if I'm being the jerk. Give me it how I need to hear it, because um, you know, change is inevitable, growth is inevitable, but you don't grow unless you're going to be ready and able to accept the constructive feedback. And again, that took me also a lot longer to understand than I probably should even admit. But
You and me
um,
both. It's okay.
yeah, but yeah, it's a heck of a journey. It's also a heck of a journey to hear somebody else articulate that back to you and understand that it is the journey that
Yeah.
provides the value and the perspective and the awareness of how you're doing what you do. Um, and it takes time, right? It is not. I mentioned it earlier. It's not a light switch moment. Um, it took me almost 20 years to start this business that I thought I would eventually have, and it wasn't an overnight thing, and it still won't be the success I want it to be, because it's going to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to mold. It's going to develop into something different than what my original thesis was. Um, but yeah, it's a powerful thing to have the people to tell you the right, wrong, or indifferent things you need to hear when you need to hear it, and that's why I also focus on people so much in the process,
Yep.
because those are the ones that are going to afflict the change and make the value long term. Process is a framework. People are going to provide the value against that framework, um, and that's what I look to do.
I love it. This is awesome. And I know that your message resonates. I know there are people out there that are saying, man, I really need to leverage his 20 years of experience because I have opportunities within my business. What's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it your LinkedIn? Is it going to vastinsightpartners.com? What's the best way?
Yeah, LinkedIn, you're gonna find, the thought of the day. Usually you'll go on there and probably see, some type of script that has no relation to FP&A or S&OP, and it's a little bit of, I'll say, the inside the mind of Tyler, because I need the encouragement and the
Mhm.
push every day to do what I'm doing, because success for me is not a constant full cup on a day-to-day basis, right? I have my ups and downs on the week to week, and I need that encouragement, and I try to give that encouragement in a manner that provides support to other people. So go on LinkedIn, engage with the content there, shoot me a message there. My email address is also present. But go out and check vastinsightpartners.com. We're continuing to add to that on a constant basis. Um, Working on case studies there, providing some testimonials and some client feedback to give insight to maybe challenges you may see. But then reach out. I always love talking to business owners, leaders, even early in career individuals that have challenges that they come across. To I may not be able to solve it, but I sure as heck am going to connect you with somebody that I know if I can't, um, and just try to drive the connection through the network. So LinkedIn would probably be the first stop. You'll find a lot of my contact information on there. Otherwise, head to the website and reach out. No matter what you do, reach out, shoot a note, and I will respond to every single one of them. Um, there's no VAs going on here.
Thank you so much, Tyler, for your time today and sharing your background, your message, your story with the Might in Motion community.
Thank you for having me, and I enjoyed the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Might in Motion. Remember, every step forward counts, and the power to create momentum starts with you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference. Until next time, stay inspired, stay mindful, and keep moving with might.